Hi everyone, and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where three Pro Tools experts demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in Avid's official Facebook support forum. Andy, we're doing well so far.
We are.
In this episode, the discussion comes from our own house, a supporter question, and it's simply, how do compressors work? And I'm not going to lie, it triggered Andy. So myself and Anders are going to wind him up, we're going to put him down, and we're just going to let him go.
Pew. So this is actually a conversation among people who use and teach Pro Tools, and I think it points to how we have to be careful with the words that we use because misconceptions can creep in, and the area of misconception that struck me was a lot of disagreement on what exactly the attack and release time parameters did in a compressor. And so let's back up. Let's build a foundation here. So basic terminology for compressors. Okay, first, threshold. Threshold is the amplitude above which attenuation can take place. Any signal below the threshold isn't affected by a compressor. Next, the ratio is the amount of attenuation compared to the original signal. The ratio indicates how much of the level will be attenuated based on the threshold. So, if you had a ratio of 2:1, any signal that was greater than the threshold would be brought down halfway to the threshold. If you had something like a 100:1 ratio, the signal would be attenuated right down to the threshold, and in these cases, the compressor would be acting like a limiter. So these are arguably the first two go-to parameters, and these are pretty commonly understood, no problem. But when you move on to the attack and release time parameters, you're likely to get a decent amount of confusion, so let's take a closer look. I've set up a little something. It's not exciting, but hopefully it'll be visually engaging enough to illustrate the concept. What I've got here is a sine wave, and if I zoom in here...
I'm pretty sure I played that level on Atari 2600. I'm sorry, Andy, continue.
That was a great one, by the way. That was a good one.
It took me a second, but I got it. The sine wave starts off at minus 30 dB, and it jumps up to minus 0 dB, and then it jumps back down to minus 30 dB. So if we take a look at the whole waveform, it's minus 30 dB, minus 0 in this big block, and then minus 30 dB again. This is our starting unprocessed signal. The first two tracks that I'm going to show you are using the Dyne 3 compressor limiter, which has been included with Pro Tools for a long time. I'm going to unfreeze these tracks, and you can see that we're back to the original waveform. I'll open up the plugin window on the top track, and you can see the vertical yellow line representing our threshold and the bent white line which shows attenuation based on the ratio. You'll see in this case, both the attack time and release times are set to their minimum. Let's start with attack time. The important thing to remember, and here's where there's a good bit of confusion, is that compression always begins the moment that a signal exceeds the threshold. That's the first point. The attack time is the time that the compressor takes from the moment that the signal exceeds the threshold to the time when the compressor is fully attenuating the signal based on the ratio. A quick setting, as shown here, will direct the compressor to clamp down on that signal quickly. Now I'm going to freeze the track and then zoom into the waveform to where the compression starts. You can see that it slams that signal down, but good. There's no waiting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's a great demonstration, Andy. And just to highlight this, I mean, the Dynamics 3 compressor, if you look at those values that you have put in there, can you show us the plugin again? The plugin window? I mean, look at the attack time here. It's down to 10 microseconds.
That's right.
That's ridiculous. So it's an ultra fast compressor.
Yeah, among the different compressors I looked at, this was about the fastest. So if you really wanted to clamp down on a signal, this plugin might be a good choice. Now, what does a slow attack time look like? I'll unfreeze this bottom track, and you'll see that the maximum attack time for this plugin is 300 milliseconds, and the release time is 4 seconds. I'll freeze this track, and if I zoom in on the beginning of the compression, you'll see that the compression still starts at the moment that the signal breaks through the threshold, but it takes much more time to get to full compression. You can see the difference between a fast attack time with the top track and a slow attack time here on the bottom track, letting more of that initial transient go through and actually emphasizing that transient attack.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great presentation. It's just such a visual thing to see. And I bet if you make a selection in the beginning of crossing that threshold until the attack time, which, if I remember correctly, is this 300 milliseconds?
Yes.
If you make that selection, you will see that it's actually exactly what is happening. So if you make a selection of 300 milliseconds here, it should be exactly the point where we see that maximum compression has been achieved. And that's it, exactly corresponding to what we visually can see there. Yeah.
Now to the release time. When the signal goes below the threshold, the release time is the amount of time that it takes for the compressor to go from full compression to no compression. If I go to this top track, you'll see that even with a fast release time, there's still compression going on until right about here, where there's no more compression. On the bottom track, we have a slow release time, and the compressor takes its sweet old time to stop clamping down on that signal. Both attack and release times are important, and using them both, you can dial in just the sound that you're looking for. The slower the attack time, the more of a signal's original transient is preserved. You can similarly set the release time to have the attenuation appropriately ease out. Let's go to another compressor, and this is another plugin that most of you are going to have, the Pro Compressor, which is a fantastic plugin. I love it. To start off, we have a Pro Compressor with a fast attack time and a fast release time. And in this case, it's interesting to note that the fastest attack time we have is 100 microseconds as opposed to 10 microseconds, as you saw with the Dynamic 3 compressor. So when you freeze this, you'll see that it takes just a little bit more time for the compression to fully kick in. This isn't a problem. It's just the difference between the two compressors. Now we have a long attack time, 1 second, which will gently ease into compression. And you can see we have that same kind of brass bell kind of curve as we had with Dynamic 3, but in this case it takes 1 full second to do it. And on the other side, you can see a fast release time on the top, and on the bottom you see a slow release time with the Pro Compressor. Again, the amount of time that it takes for the jaws to fully release. Now let's start to take a look at a couple others. Now, attack and release time means the same thing in all compressors and limiters and expanders and gates for that matter. But how it's implemented is different, especially when you start to talk about emulations. So let's go to the very famous 1176s.
It might also be worth mentioning that attack and release times are present in all compressors, whether you get access to their controls or not. The 1170, the LA2A being a perfect example.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, totally. That's a great thing to say, Dave. Yep.
Okay, so here's the Bomb Factory 1176 plugin. And there are a lot of 1176 emulations out there, and they all have pretty similar designs. The interesting thing with this GUI is that the attack and release knobs are inverted, so turning the knob clockwise gives you a faster attack or release. And here again, you see a fast attack on the top and a slower attack on the bottom.
Could you just stretch the waveform out a little bit, Andy? Because this is interesting, because the 1176 it's an FET compressor, right? And that type of circuitry is known to be super, super, super reactive, super quick. But this is kind of demonstrating that it's slower than the Pro Compressor and Dynamics 3.
Well, plugins can do things that physical devices can't. And it's often easier to give us levels of control when you're working with software than it is when we're working with hardware. With software, we can shake off a lot of the shackles of the physical world. But one thing you mentioned about the 1176 being very reactive, take a look at this. Both a fast attack time and a slow attack time are pretty quick when you compare them with things like the Dyne 3 or the Pro Compressor. And if you take a look at the release times, you can see the difference between a fast and slow release time with the 1176.
If I look at that attack time, can we look at the attack time again? I would say that it's like an exponential curve. It gives you a lot of compression very early on, but the slope then very rapidly eases out, and it takes a long time for it to reach maximum compression, but it does a lot of compression still in the very beginning.
That specific compressor type is so useful for transient material, kick drums, snare drums, etc., because it does let that initial attack sample through.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Moving on, we've got a Fairchild plugin emulation, and you'll see that even though it has the same kind of exponential slope, it's a little different than the others, and this is something that contributes to different compressors having their unique qualities. One thing to notice here is that with the attack times, the difference between a fast attack and a slow attack is not too much, but the difference between a fast release time and a slow release time is much greater. A lot of the flexibility that you can get is in setting not only the attack time correctly, but the release time as well. Just a couple of others real quickly. This is a BX console, and I wanted to use the SSL console, but it didn't have the controls that I wanted to show, so I'm using the Focusrite version. Here are some comparisons of the attack time. Again, fast on top and slow on bottom. And here are the release times, fast on top, slow on bottom.
It's a fascinating, actually.
Because of the different shapes that all of these compressors create, that's really like where the differences in compression style and how they sound lies, right? In how fast or what slope does the curve have?
Exactly. And honestly, if you don't know this, and if you don't know how to use these parameters, you're missing out on all the stuff the secret sauce that makes all of these so different. Now, Anders has his favorite. He calls it his secret weapon.
Don't tell anyone, Andy. We spoke about this. Don't mention this.
No, your secret's safe with me. If you take a look here, you can see that it's got a potentially very fast attack. We're down in the realm of 0.1 milliseconds, which equals 100 microseconds. You can see that there's some interesting behavior here, but it gets right to business. And below it, you see a slow attack time.
And it really clamps down quickly, even with a slow attack time.
Absolutely. And when we look at the release times, same kind of thing. A bigger difference between release times than what we typically see with attack times. So have I convinced you guys that there's no delay involved with the attack and release times?
Yes.
Nothing's waiting for anything. It's simply how long it takes for compression to complete when you're talking attack time, or to be completely removed, which is the case with release time. And these, in my opinion, are two settings that separate the casual compression user or abuser from someone who can really dial in the sound that they're looking for. And along those lines, and to kind of finish things up, I want to show something. And I promise that this isn't an Avid ad or anything, but it is something that I absolutely adore about the Pro Compressor. Pro Compressor isn't only great for its sound, but also for its really well thought out feature set. Now I'm going to set the attack and release time to its quickest value and solo the track. Now at this point, we're basically crushing the heck out of this, and it sounds like the drum kit is in like a cardboard box. It's flat, it's lifeless, it's the kind of sounds that compressors get a bad rap for. Now if we want to add more punch, more of the initial transient needs to pass through. What do we need? We need to slow the attack time. The question is, how much? Now experienced professionals will tell you rightly to use your ears as your guide, but there's also a cool little feature in this plugin that's going to make that job a lot easier. Take a look at this little speaker icon. When it's engaged, what you'll hear is not the compressed signal of the output of the plugin, but rather what's being attenuated, what's being cut. So if I turn this on and I play, you'll notice that what we're hearing and what we're seeing in the reduction meter is the same. And if I take my attack time and lengthen it out, you'll gradually hear the punch of that kick go away. If you don't hear the punch of the kick here, that means the punch of the kick isn't being attenuated and will go through the compressor unmolested. So now what's going to happen when we turn it off? Now we're using the compressor to bring out the punch of the kick, compressing after more of that initial transient gets through.
Great demonstration.
And I think that once you get beyond basic mixing skills, experimenting with compressor attack and release times, and this goes for expanders as well, will really help you get the sound that you're going after.
Terrific. I love Pro Compressor, like Anders said. It's a terrific compressor. I think it's the perfect compressor to learn compression with.
It's great. It's great.
Really great discussion. Andy, thank you very much.
You bet.
If you got a lot out of that, you can hit a thumbs up on our video. You can also subscribe to our channel as well if you haven't already done so. It certainly helps getting our videos out to more Pro Tools users who hopefully will benefit from the stuff and the technique and stuff that we're showing on each of our weekly episodes. If you head over to protoolsanswers.com, you can find out a little bit more about us over there. You can also subscribe to our Inner Circle. We're a community-funded channel, and the supporters really help us keep going, and they get some very tangible benefits for being part of our Inner Circle, including monthly masterclasses, which, as we've just discovered, I missed last week. Anders usually runs those, and it's a little bit of a toss-up as to whether Andy or myself can make it, but Anders has been running those like a boss, and we really appreciate him for doing so.
We do.
And it's, I mean, I have such a great time in the masterclasses, a handful of great audio engineers and really, really good guys.
Thank you very much, Anders. So thank you very much to Anders. Thank you very much to Andy. Terrific presentation. Thank you very much to you guys for watching. We will see you on the next episode. My name's Dave. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we are out.